Next thing we're going to dig into is global dodging and burning, where we are going to sculpt the image very broadly. So my idea here is to bring back any dimension I might have lost during the frequency separation steps, or if I just want to make something appear a little bit more dimensional, or I want to hide that dimensionality. So I'm going to do things like maybe emphasizing the jawline a little bit. In some of the dark tones of the clothing, I'm going to brighten those up. I'm going to accentuate some of the hair highlights and overall add a little bit more shape to the various body parts. And this is going to go relatively quickly, and there are many different ways to dodge and burn. My preferred method is a 50% gray layer, and I'll be dodging and burning on that. So let's dig in. New layer, fill it with 50% gray, set it to either overlay or soft light. I'm using a soft light. I'm going to be using the dodge and burn tools at about an 8 to a 10%. I'd probably say I leave it at an 8% more often than not. And my go-to to switch back and forth is going to be the Option key. So if you dodge, for example, but if you hold down the Option key, it will burn the exact opposite setting you happen to be on. So I'm on an 8% mid-tone exposure, which is going to paint the dodge, and then if I hold down the Option key, it's going to paint the burn. And I don't actually have to switch tools, and I find that to be particularly useful. I use that all the time. All right, so let's add a little bit of contour and texture. Start with the hair. Doesn't actually matter where you go, but really good retouchers are particularly amazing at this step. I don't do a heavy amount here necessarily. Sometimes I do. It really depends on the image. And I will regularly switch back and forth the on and off to see if I like it. You also got to be careful about what these do to your textures. Certain textures have a little bit more flexibility and certain ones have a little bit less. So you can even do it to do things like even out issues. So if I wanted to darken this down a little bit, make that arm feel a little bit smoother, I can do it with light. It's very subtle, and the tablet's very useful for this. So many times people want to jump in to liquefy to change the shape of things, but you can do so much with light. And it's important to know how valuable dodge and burn really can be as far as making things look how you want them to look. And you're going to see a pretty drastic transformation by the time this is all said and done on the whole image. An easy way to think about dodging and burning, at least in the beginning, is to just lighten the light parts and darken the dark parts, and that can add a little bit of contour and depth to whatever you're working on. From there, you can explore different techniques, and you're going to end up being able to manipulate the light in a lot more creative ways. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to accentuate the jawline. I'm going to do a little bit of jawline movement and neck movement in liquefy later on, and preemptively, just to give a little bit more definition here, I'm going to darken it a little bit. And I may even come in later, but I really want to make sure that that jaw is nice and defined. And then just to accentuate it a little bit, I'm going to add some highlights. There and there. Remember, think about how light falls in the image. It's going to fall, and what's closest to the light is going to be the brightest, what's further away is going to be the darkest, which seems like it makes a lot of sense, but it's going to affect the way you dodge and burn. Lighten some of his hair highlights a little bit. Give him a little bit more separation. I'm really going to kick this up a little bit more. I'm going to pop it even more in a second, but for now we're just going to keep this pretty innocuous and simple. Pretty basic, I mean. And this very subtle depth here on the arm is going to help the arm pop out even more against this background, which exists in a very similar tonal palette and color range. Don't be afraid to undo something if you don't like what it looks like. Instead of piling stuff on, it's always easier. So I always say, remember the shortcut for dodging, for undo, which is Command Z, and step backwards, which is Command Option Z. And you don't want to go too fake. You can easily push dodging and burning into something that looks real bad by overly doing it. So like I think this is too far. And because I'm on a 50% gray layer, if I just want to undo it, I just am going to grab 50% gray from a brush. And I'm going to paint it on top. And it's kind of like an eraser, but I can still use the tool later on how I want to. I find that to be pretty useful.